The enchantment of disenchantment that our culture has lived through is increasingly coming to a close. And by that I mean that the narrative spell of modernity, that the world is inanimate and to be exploited for our individual gains, that the sacred is at worst a erotic avoidance of reality and at best just a private psychological experience. These spells are no longer working and they're beginning to fade. But now we have the opportunity to make the journey together. And the job of teachers and teachings will be to help cohorts operate at baseline turquoise, a level of group intelligence, so that these learning communities can guide and support each other by leveraging the developmental we space. Some lineages flow from the past. This one is flowing from the future, here to us.
What you're about to hear is just one voice in a growing sacred revolution. You can watch the full talk and join the movement at integrallife.com, where a new future is being born.
So as many of you know, we are the beginning of experiencing a fourth industrial revolution. We see a time ahead that's only been previously glimpsed through science fiction, fairy tales, mythology. You know, a time where whole realities can be created at the swipe of a wand. A time where our thoughts, imaginings, and dreams can be read from our very brains and conjured into imagery and video. We've heard all this hype before. But we're awakening animacy and agency in the very tools we have used thus far to build civilization. You know, over the last few years, I've been talking and interacting with many people involved in artificial intelligence and been reminded of the story of the Sorcerer's Apprentice. And just as I was sitting down to write this, I synchronistically received an email from my friend, colleague, and fellow presenter, Tom Murray, also mentioning the Sorcerer's Apprentice. So I thought it would be important to speak it into the space as a dimension of what's happening in our future. Now, the most well-known of this ancient archetypal tale comes from the poetic pen of Johann Wolfgang Goethe, 1797. The poem begins as an old adept, magician, and alchemist leaves his workshop. We don't know why he left, but the adepts definitely left our civilization a while ago. He leaves his adolescent apprentice with the duties, responsibilities, and chores of civilization to perform. And tired of doing the manual work of fetching water by hand, the apprentice, using magic that he's not yet fully adept in, enchants a broom to do the work. And soon the apprentice realizes that he cannot stop his tool. The broom is hauling water faster and faster. The floor is covered with water. And in an attempt to stop the runaway broom, the apprentice splits it with an axe. But each piece of the broom, when split, then replicates and continues fetching water at an increased speed. The entire room begins to flood. When all seems lost, the old adept returns, quickly breaks the spell, reminding his apprentice that only a master should invoke such powerful spirits. Now, such stories point to our culture's current adolescent psychology and its adolescent culture. It's a story that indicates the dangers of adolescence when given access to powerful technology before developing the ethics, wisdom, and compassion necessary to wield it skillfully. I was raised by my maternal grandmother to respect the soul, the anima, in all of matter, no matter how primitive. She used to share that rocks and metals were condensed forms of primitive consciousness, and they were also making their pilgrimage towards the Godhead, albeit a little slower than the minerals in our own bodies. So she would even remind this when I was unloading the dishwasher, that how I held the cutlery mattered. You can imagine how well that went down for a busy 12-year-old. But how we do something matters. The how is a form of ritual, and it reveals the intention, the seed of a thing, whether birthing a technology or a child. In the current foie gras approach to AI, which is concerning, we're just educating matter by shoveling as much as we can down the throat of an intelligence. But it's concerning because how we raise intelligence matters. It determines who and what it becomes. It reveals a lot about ourselves. The modern Western psyche has laughed at the idea of alchemy, that stones could be conscious, archetypally resonating specific psychic qualities, that they could become sentient. But suddenly, the modified mineral kingdom is awakening, and it's learning at an exponential rate. An awakening of matter, a transformational process on a planetary scale. Unfortunately, less the alchemical laboratory of the adept and more the laboratory of his apprentice. So as I've said, currently behind this drive, this fourth industrial revolution, is this psychology of modernity, the drive of our youth. How far can we push the limits? How fast can we go? How high? How far can we push this forward? How much freedom, wealth, and power can we amass without the repercussions from our elders? Now, these are the motivations of the adolescent male when there are no elders present. They're on the golf course, at the country club, they're in front of the television. But from the perspective of traditional cultures grounded in sacred world, what we're seeing is indicative of failed initiation. The inability of our culture to be brought into right relationship with sacred world, ourselves, and our responsibilities and duties as member of a much larger community of interbeing. Every civilization and culture on our planet has had initiatory systems. The question of how to construct cultural containers for gradual transformation and responsibility is what was as important thousands of years ago as it is today. The Eleusinian mysteries ran for 2,000 years and educated the intelligentsia of the ancient world, and were only stopped about 392 CE by Emperor Theodosius. 2,000-year initiatory system. Now, the enchantment of disenchantment that our culture has lived through is increasingly coming to a close. And by that I mean that the narrative spell of modernity, that the world is inanimate and to be exploited for our individual gains, that the sacred is at worst a neurotic avoidance of reality and at best just a private psychological experience. These spells are no longer working, and they're beginning to fade. Simultaneously to this stirring fourth industrial revolution is another revolution, a revolution of the sacred, of the human interior, of intersubjectivity, a psychedelic revolution, a revolution of spirituality and non-duality, a revolution of which this gathering is an expression. Alfred Toynbee, the great British historian of civilization, went on the record to say that probably the most important event of the 20th century was the Dharma coming to the West. The arrival of millennial-old traditions of contemplative development meeting a modern civilization for the first time. Sparks are bound to fly. And this meeting of outer traditions was synchronistic with other social movements at the time. We saw this flowering in human consciousness during the 60s, stimulated by Eastern Dharma, psychedelics, feminism, the social justice movement, and what we know of as the green stage of postmodern development blossomed. I believe and know that many of you too see that we are finding ourselves at another synchronistic moment in time. It's been over 50 years since that revolution in societal consciousness rippled through the collective. And the integral level of development that followed this postmodern collective birth has been a little more individualistic in its orientation. But now is the time for another collective flowering, a time for a revolution of sacred humanism. The psyche's turquoise response to the challenge of our cultural adolescence, a new collective movement of spirituality, science, non-duality, psychedelics, and integral theory. Our movement has the possibility to be the returning adept, opening the door to his workshop just at the moment of possible flooding. Planetary wisdom culture is birthing a fourth turning in response to the fourth turning, or the fourth industrial revolution. Right? In order for this industrial revolution to meet our culture, we also need a fourth interior turning, activating evolutionary bodhisattvas to advance and heal civilization by utilizing deliberately developmental technologies. Our good friend Ken, in his last publication, The Religion of Tomorrow, gave us his recent and comprehensive elucidation around the fourth turning. And I'm going to offer us some other resonant perspectives. The first thing to appreciate is that there is magic behind this. This is not just a project that we are building up from the ground towards heaven. It's a project sanctioned and protected by the spiritual hierarchy of this planet. And please don't choke. But in all honesty, the planetary Metasangha is in full support of this collective endeavor. And how do I know this? What gives me the confidence and audacity to share this? Well, like you, I'm a representative of this tradition. Some lineages flow from the past. This one is flowing from the future, here to us now. Right? The great human Metasangha of advanced souls transcends time. The future is here. The highest teaching in the Indo-Tibetan process tradition is called the Kala Chakra, the teaching of the time wheel. Our fourth turning is a planetary time wheel. What is a time wheel, Tantra? It's a time machine. It's a teaching that takes us from one time to another, from one developmental level of civilization to another. The fourth turning is the first cycle of Dharmic teachings to integrate the understanding of the four quadrants and the four global truths. The truth that we have pervading suffering in the psychological, physical, cultural, and systemic dimensions of this planet. that this suffering is caused by multi-generational trauma that continues to cause reactive stress in every level and quadrant of development. But the truth is that this trauma can be addressed by the waking, growing, opening, cleaning, and showing up initiatory path of forth-turning radical wholeness. The fourth turning is related to the integrative, holistic, and unifying language of cross-paradigmatic turquoise. However, as a specific focus of awakening, it is related to what KW calls the violet metamind. Now, the metamind is the Buddhic intelligence that Sri Aurobindo referred to as the psychic being. The psychic being, or the soul. The structure that the soul uses on its evolutionary journey of return. Psychedelics. Psychedelics. The judicious use and integration of entheogens back into the path is here to stay. Here in Colorado, we are at the very front of that revolution. No doubt there are many of us here today who have benefited from the skillful use of such medicines. But the return of psychedelics is a new chapter in a long battle between those supportive of sacred world and empire. Just imagine what would have happened had the Christian Roman Empire not eradicated the use of entheogens 2,000 years ago, which was a policy of the Church and the Inquisition. Just get a sense of how developed our kind of alchemical psychochemistry would be at this point in time. The understanding of psychochemistry is a vital part of the initiatory process. We have lost access to the lower rungs of sacred world. By that I mean the sacred that isn't just transpersonal, but the sacred that is personal. The plant kingdom, the astral dimension, the realm of Fae, the shamanic realm that our garden planet has much to teach us about who we are. Now, this gradual rechemicalization of our brains, whether it's through plant medicines or refined next generation psychedelics, whether it's through dark retreat or the sustained practice of lucid dreaming, is not just a psychological catalyst, but it really helps us access real objective dimensions of our sacred planetary system, dimensions of our sacred world that have been left unexplored except for the few for many centuries. It's going to be important to provide educational funnels from the psychedelic circles and into more committed, ongoing practice. There's going to be a lot of confusion out there as millions of people plunge into their psychedelic journeys. And as a community, we have a lot to offer to help clarify the pre-trans stew that these medicines can cook up. Again, as in the case of AI, it's important that we don't just use these intelligences, but that we approach these plants and medicines with great respect and honor that allows for a co-creative, intelligent process, a real intersubjective engagement that might transform our civilization forever.
Hey everyone, we just watched John Churchill speak about the dawning of a new sacred revolution, one that brings together technology, soul, psychology, psychedelics, and the future of human consciousness. This is just a glimpse of the full presentation, which you can watch right now on integrallife.com, the home and ground zero of this sacred revolution. If this message moves you even just a little bit, consider supporting the movement by becoming a core member of integrallife.com today. Let's build this future. together.